everyone. Welcome to our third episode of Crimes and Closings. We're glad to have you. I'm Dia Kappelman.
I'm Jenny Olson-Payton, and we're being consistent.
We are.
I know, I'm loving this. Every other week we're here, and I look forward to it.
Yeah.
So,
and this week we are talking about something that kind of spurred off of last time's Graham Young, the teacup poisoner, and we got talking about what if he had been involved in this.
Yeah.
So I guess our actually, and if you don't know what that is, listen to the last episode.
Yep.
But our actually this week is an apology to Graham Young.
Sorry, dude.
You didn't do it. We thought we had solved it.
We really did. We were really excited that, on our second episode, we were already cracking cases and
not the
yeah,
case.
no.
Still unsolved.
No. Though with, some of the people that he had surrounding him, I guess it's possible, but and he would have had to get overseas and do all sorts of things.
It was kind of out of his wheelhouse.
Yeah, out of the wheelhouse. But it was a good thought. It's a good thought. So today I'm going to talk about the Tylenol murders. And this happened in 1982. So I have vague recall. I was born in 1978. I have vague recall of the aftermath of this. It happened in Chicago. The first victim died September 29th, 1982. Her name was Mary Kellerman. She was a 12-year-old little girl, stayed home from school. Mom and dad did what all of us do, gave her some Tylenol to help fight the sickness. And within an hour, she had passed away. It's kind of weird because of the age. It looked like she had either had a stroke or had a cardiac incident. But with her age, everybody was kind of weirded out about that. So then the next thing that happens is that a gentleman named Adam Janus was home from work, wasn't feeling really good, ended up popping a couple of Tylenol and passed away. Was taken to the hospital where he passed away. As soon as the family found out that he had passed away, they started coming from all over the place, and all kind of went to his house to try to, put together what was going to happen and funeral arrangements and things like that. The brother, Stanley, and his wife, Teresa, both didn't feel really good. So they went and got a bottle of Tylenol and both took 2 Tylenol. Stanley almost immediately passed away. And then Teresa was on life support, I think, for 3 days before she ended up passing away. And at the hospital, one of the doctors actually said, so one of the nurses came up to him and were like, the Janus family's back. And he was like, I was really I was worried about his parents. They were frail. They obviously took the news hard. And she's like, no, it was the brother and the sister-in-law. And he's like, you mean that strapping young man that I was talking to is the one that, he's like, that doesn't make any sense. So then at this point, they start kind of putting things together. Unfortunately, not quick enough, because there were also some more victims. A total of 7 were specifically for this, I guess, incident. Unfortunately, it spurred a ton of copycats, but they believe 7 people were murdered from this incident.
And this was all in 1982, correct?
Yeah, 1982 in Chicago, around Chicago and the suburbs. Super quick. Yeah, and actually it caused some legislation to go through, and that legislation went through in 1983. So we're talking very quickly. And Johnson & Johnson's response is really what brought it along. So 3 more people. Mary McFarland, she was at work, wasn't feeling well, ended up taking Tylenol, and they found her dead in the bathroom. Paula Prince was a flight attendant, wasn't feeling great on her flight, stopped by, I believe, a Jewel pharmacy, picked up some Tylenol, and they found her dead in her apartment. And then Mary Reiner, and this tragically was a mom. She just had her 4th baby and had taken some Tylenol to deal with some of the postpartum aches and pains. And she passed away as well, unfortunately, leaving 4 kids and a mourning husband. So that was really, really sad. So what one of the interesting things that happened is that they went to the family's house. They're like, okay, well, something has to be, we have 3 people from this house. Something must be going on. So they open, they're like, all looking through the that thing on the wall. Thank you, the cabinet. And they pull out the Tylenol, and one of the investigators opens it, and he's like, it smells like almonds. And so oddly enough, only like half the people can smell almonds, the cyanide almond smell,
Really?
which is really crazy, which makes it,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it makes it why some people might not be able to smell when they were obviously opening and taking the
Put
pills.
that on my list of concerns. Was I can't smell almonds now.
Yeah.
That seems important.
Is it COVID or can you not smell almonds? Yeah. And so he's like, yeah, smell this. And they're like, oh yeah, something's going on. So they realized that the pills had actually been laced with potassium cyanide. So, and not only laced, if you remember, they were actually at the time, I always remember the commercial where they're opening and there's all these little like balls coming out.
Yes.
They were
If you couldn't
capsules.
swallow pills or something,
Yep.
you could open them up and dissolve it in water.
Yeah, or applesauce was the
Yes.
famous, I still can't stomach applesauce to this
Oh.
day because of it. But so they actually, so it was super easy to get in there, tamper with it, and then get it back on the shelf. And
Because
that's,
there were no seals or anything.
No
on it
seals or
like
anything
we're
like
used
that.
to now, like
nope, you'd literally
hard to open.
pop it open, and there's a little piece of cotton, and that was it. So there was a lot of speculation. After they realized what was going on, they checked all of the Tylenol. There were 8 bottles total that were found. 5 in homes, 2 had been returned when they recalled, and then 1 was still on the shelf waiting to be bought. So
So they think it was tampered with afterwards, not
Yep.
at the manufacturer, but
at one point they were considering that maybe it was some kind of white collar crime syndicate going specifically after Johnson and Johnson. But they kind of,
Gamble.
I see you. But they actually ruled that out. They ended up, they do believe that something happened, that they either purchased it or stole it and then brought it home, doctored it, and put it back on the shelf. Yeah, which was really scary. Hey, dear, can I get you a Tylenol? Advil?
No. Yeah, I'm just put that after this.
Yeah, gonna switch to Advil. But one of the cool things that came from this is that, you know, I always joke about the Jaws, the mayor from Jaws, you know, what did he do when they realize there's a killer shark on the beach? They say, okay, we're just gonna let everybody in the water and what happens, happens. Johnson and Johnson did not do that. So they did not pull a Jaws mayor. They actually really rallied and said, okay, we're offering a reward. We're going to make huge changes. They recalled 31 million bottles of Tylenol,
Wow.
replaced them, removed the capsules, and put them with a, what is it? They call it a couple of different things, capsule, and turned it into like a caplet. Yes. Which was just easier to swallow, because same thing, easier to swallow, just doesn't have the ability to tamper with. They did those.
Interesting.
Yep. 1983, they introduced something called the Tylenol bill, which makes it much more tamper resistant. The foil, went out and got box trucks and were driving around really all over the country yelling, you know, don't take Tylenol, don't. I mean, so
Even though this was just centralized in Chicago.
centralized in Chicago. Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, Johnson and Johnson really did their part to make sure that they addressed it and got it taken care of. So kudos to them for that. At one point, their stock went from like 35% or market share 35% down to 8%. And by the time everybody saw what they went through and the fact that after all these precautions, they're probably one of the safest ones in the market, it immediately went back up and became a dominating force in the pain killing industry, I guess. Yeah, so weirdly enough, you know, with everything that you have going on these days and the ability of people seeing things, I mean, when you think about things that can slip under your eyesight, they've never been caught. This person has never been caught. They have a couple different suspects, but nobody specifically. There is, interestingly enough, a surveillance picture, of course, no video, of a gentleman that seems to be watching Paula Prince purchase the bottle of Tylenol. So they think that
But this is 80s surveillance.
80s surveillance. So it could be Robert E. Lee, it could be, you know, it could be James Bond. We don't know. But it's a picture of a very thin, bushy beard man, kind of being suspicious. And you can see Paula Prince buying the Tylenol. So they think he came in, replaced the Tylenol, and was waiting for somebody to come and buy it. Unfortunately, she did. So they have a couple of different suspects. The first one is a guy named Roger Arnold. And he was just kind of he was a dock worker. He was a little rough around the edges. And he was known to be saying some really off-color things, specifically at a bar. And so when the police went and questioned him, he got really mad and actually went back to the bar and was going to kill the bartender, who he was the one that felt that he was the one that like ratted on him, and accidentally shot and killed another man.
Oh my goodness.
He spent 30 years, he was going to spend 30 years in prison. He passed away in 2008. While he was a suspect, they don't really know, they don't really think it was him, but he's definitely on the suspect list. The second one, and this guy is a trip. I mean, if you watch him in some of the videos, he's just he's an odd duck. His name is James Lewis. He actually wrote a letter to Johnson & Johnson, and the letter is really uncomfortable to read, and his fingerprints were on it. So he left specific fingerprints on this letter. But at one point, he alludes to the fact that it was easy for him to do. He only spent $50, and it took him 5 minutes to do a bottle. He also said, if you want nothing to happen and these things to keep happening, nothing to stop, and you want these things to keep happening, then ignore it, or you can wire $1 million into this account number. Weirdly enough, it wasn't his account number. It was a gentleman that had been accused of stealing from Mr. Lewis's wife. So he was hoping this whole thing would like shed light on the fact that this guy stole $511 from his wife.
Did he sign it?
He did not sign it, but the fingerprints and his MO were kind of all over it. Because oddly enough, he also had been known for mail extortion, and he got a 20-year sentence in which he served 13 years.
Were there fingerprints on the bottles?
That is a good question.
Did they find any fingerprints on the bottles?
Oddly enough, no, there was not any fingerprints on the bottles. So this person did, take precaution.
So it seems a little bit odd though that there would be fingerprints all over the letter, and that he would trace it back to someone that could be traced back to him, but there wasn't anything on the bottles.
He's an odd duck. He actually ended up writing a book, and the book was actually called something. I had to write it down because it was so dang obscure. It was something along the lines of, and I can't find it right now, but it was something along the lines of like how to poison a crowd. I mean, it was but he was saying that it had nothing to do with this. It actually had to do with a water source poisoning. So he was brought into a news. And I watched this and it was really uncomfortable to watch because he's just very odd. And the host is just drilling him. And he's like, how is it that, you've done all of this, you've ratted all these people out, you've stolen money. And I mean, it's really uncomfortable to watch because the guy is he's not right in the head. Mm. So he also was the accountant for somebody that he had kind of an altercation with. And the guy ended up being found dead in his attic, dismembered.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so he was actually exonerated on that one, but there's still quite a bit of speculation. The guy's just not right. But he was, for the mail fraud, he was given 20 years, he served 13. He and his wife are now thought to be in overseas somewhere. So
probably safer.
I would say so. And oddly enough, he does match the description of the surveillance photo. So the third one is a trip and a half. And I think I'd known this, but I think I kind of forgot it because, when you get to be a little bit older, you have to purge things to remember others. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
Really?
Yeah. So his first bomb was found in Illinois. His parents live in Illinois in the Chicago area. And actually there's a bunch of armchair sleuths that I just love, that have done just a bunch of like timeline and mapping, and basically his parents' house are in the middle of where all the Tylenol bottles were found.
Oh my goodness.
One of the ones that has been kind of speculated to be a copycat was in was in Wyoming. Oddly enough, was on the path to his cabin, and the same time that in which he was traveling back and forth to his cabin. The other thing, and I had forgotten this too, Ted Kaczynski had some kind of issue with wood. A lot of his homemade explosives had pieces of wood in it. Mm-hmm. He would use a return address that was Frederick Benjamin Isaac Wood, and who lived on like Wood Road in Woodbridge, California. So there was a lot of ties to wood in what he did. Oddly enough, the Johnson & Johnson brothers, their middle name was Wood.
Really?
Yeah. So there's some speculation that it is Mr. Kaczynski. It very well could be, and the picture very well could pass for him too. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. So some of the good things that happened from this, I mean, obviously when there's human death, that's never a good thing. But we saw some huge changes in the way the pharmacies handle things. We saw tamper resistant lids, foil packaging, and basically everybody kind of uniting and saying, we don't want something like this to happen again. Weirdly enough, I think there's also been some spawning of urban legends, which is another one of my huge like things I love. And I probably, one of the first Halloweens I remember was probably 83 or 84. And the fear of parents making sure you check your candy.
Yeah, razor blades.
Razor blades.
Razor blades were everywhere.
Yep.
Every piece of candy.
They think that urban legend spurred from this as well, because the timeline adds up and all of that. So yeah, it's strange to think like something like that. What could have truly happened had it not been stopped?
Yes.
How widespread could it have gone? And what would have happened had Johnson & Johnson not taken the action they did, and the world not taken the action they did, and what could still happen? Because unfortunately, there's just a lot of not nice people in the world, and they want to watch the world burn, and that's a good way to cause some problems.
And we can't even imagine a world now, and most people can't, that you don't have those protective coverings, you don't have those safety seals,
Yeah.
You don't have even the lids that are hard to take off, but that was normal.
Right.
And now we have video cameras everywhere, we have cell phone tracking, all of that.
Yep.
But this was, in the 80s.
It's a miracle we got through childhood.
It is.
When I remember, my mom tells the story of seatbelts weren't a big thing when I was born. So she's like, I realized that when I was watching you bounce on your bouncer across the back seat in your, booster, that it was time to probably put a seatbelt on you. And
different world.
For sure.
Wow, good job.
Thank you. And
Interesting.
I've already gotten the memo that next week I need to wear a costume.
Yes. Okay. All right, now to the closings part of our crimes and closings.
Yep.
This market is nuts.
Insane.
Still. Yeah. And it doesn't show any signs of slowing down right now.
It is the James Lewis of markets right now.
Crazy.
It's that nutty.
And we get asked constantly when it's going to change, when we think there are signs that it probably will start slowing down, but we're still pretty much in full swing.
Yep.
And we're seeing a lot of appraisal waivers in its present condition, which is something that we should talk about.
Right.
They've instituted several changes to the in its present condition form.
Right.
So when you purchase a home, it's an addendum that can be included saying how you're going to take the home. And really important for sellers and buyers to both understand what that means, because one of the new policies,
and agents, quite frankly,
a lot of agents need to understand. I'm seeing that a lot too. 2 of the 3 options, buyers have no right to cancel anymore. And that's kind of a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So
yeah, as a short sale specialist, the last thing I want is for one of my buyers to become a short sale client seller later on. And I'm seeing a lot of that, people paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 over asking price. And then saying that not only are you going to pay that exorbitant amount, you're going to pay cash for some of it if the house doesn't appraise, and you're not going to have them make any repairs. Something like a foundation could come up, a sewer could come up, and you better make sure you really, really love that house and before you check the boxes. So I usually recommend always checking its box number 1, that you agree, you understand, and that you're probably not going to negotiate repairs. And you have the right to cancel if something comes up during inspection. You do have the right for inspection. I rarely ever suggest somebody waives their inspection.
Which in this market is really hard to do because some people are. So to stay competitive, that's an option some people are taking.
Yep. And you know, like I said, ultimately it's up to your client. You're hired to be the best advocate you can for your client. But that also means making sure they understand the full scope of what they're going to accept.
And as a buyer, educating yourself on what that means
Right.
for you.
Yep. And as a seller, what, you know, and that's one of the things you always see too, is that a lot of people will do that as an addendum and then come back and ask for repairs. So understand that's probably a possibility that they're going to do it. Doesn't mean you need to, but understand they could get out of the contract because of those things that need to be done and are considered unacceptable. So yeah, so it's one of the good ways to get a cutting edge in this market. But you got to make sure you know what you're talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Stay informed.
Yep.
Stay knowledgeable. Have an agent that knows what they're doing. And
Yep.
is aware of everything that each box entails.
Yep. And is looking out for your best interest. So,
All right. Another week under the books.
Yep.
Stay tuned in 2 more weeks.
Yep. We'll be back. So have a great rest of the week.
See you later.
Bye.